Hey, what is up guys? In this week's video, I'm just going to be sharing some of my experiences with 3D printing with PETG. It's kind of a love child between PLA and ABS. There are a number of advantages to printing with PETG over ABS and PLA, but I'll just leave that discussion towards one of Thomas Solander's videos, the popular 3D printing advocate on YouTube, and he would probably be more knowledgeable about that. I originally bought my 3D printer in my last week of school just to help me finish some of the parts for my last assignment. And when I finished that assignment, I was just about done my first spool of PLA, and I wanted to try something new, so I went towards PETG plastic. So I purchased a spool of white PETG filament. Me being new to 3D printing, this was a bit trickier than I thought it was to set up. And since PLA is a fairly easy material to print with and not requiring as much tinkering as PETG does, PLA is a fairly forgiving 3D printing filament, but PETG requires more tinkering, and I hear that there's more variances between different companies and different spools. So each new spool you get might have a different set of optimized settings for it. Now, I started my journey with PETG printing by looking up a forum, which actually gave me a pretty solid beginner's preset, which I'll probably leave in the link down below. But for my first several prints, I had some issues with the material not seating properly on the bed. And in this video, I'm just going to discuss some of the things that I noticed about printing with this new material. Some characteristics I experienced was that it actually required a hotter temperature, not just in the bed temperature, but also the nozzle temperature. So I think I went up about 250 degrees for my nozzle temperature and about 85 to 90 degrees for my bed temperature. But I think for PETG, the hotter is probably better for bed adhesion. Another thing I also noticed is that the material oozes a lot when you heat it up with such a high temperature, so it just kind of drips out through the nozzle prior to printing, which makes it a bit difficult because you kind of have to wipe the nozzle before you begin printing. And with my experience in PETG printing, I normally had the bed a little bit lower than I would normally have it for PLA, just because the material, when it tries to seat itself on the bed, it requires a little bit more space. So I normally leave like a little bit more space between the nozzle and the bed. It does this thing that sort of looks like air printing. It's kind of hard to show, but I'm sure as you tinker around with PETG printing, then you'll probably see what I mean. And normally I don't get my leveling right on the first time just because I'm just kind of new to this, but sometimes I'll even start a print and then continue to adjust my bed height just so I'll be able to actually see when the filament is coming out, whether or not my bed's at the correct height. Lastly, one of the more minor things I noticed was a bit of stringing with the material. So when the nozzle head goes to a different portion of your print, sometimes it'll string along a really thin thread. And I found that mostly with just printing with PETG. I'm sure this might happen with some other plastics as well, but for me, I've had that issue. It's not that bad right now just because I'm able to just use an X-Acto and clean off my prints once I'm done. But if you have any suggestions for any settings I could probably change with the slicer and exporting the G-code file, I would gladly take some advice for that. So those are just some of my thoughts in printing with PETG over the last month or so. I found that there's a lot more things that you can mess up with your print, and so you really have to kind of baby your PETG print to make sure you get that first layer of bed adhesion on properly. If you guys have any thoughts or comments, I'd love to hear you guys in the comment section down below. If you want to follow my journey in design, build, and 3D printing, feel free to subscribe. I'll be here posting every week on YouTube, and I'll see you guys in the next week.